We are rapidly approaching a point where the academic peer review process could become a closed loop. Authors using LLMs to optimize their submissions, and reviewers using LLMs to evaluate them. It's a scenario that raises immediate, critical questions about validity, stability, and gameability. A new paper titled Review Arcade on the human alignment and gameability of LLM reviews takes this head-on. Conducted by researchers from the University of Hamburg and OTH Amberg-Weiden, this study performs a large-scale empirical evaluation on 984 real submissions from the ACL rolling review. They aren't just looking at whether LLMs can write a review. They're testing if LLM reviews align with human judgment, how stable those reviews are, and whether authors can game the system using iterative editing. If you're building review systems, or if you're an author wondering if you can optimize your paper for an LLM judge, this is essential viewing. Let's break down the findings. The study is guided by 3 core research questions. First, LLM review validity. Can LLMs produce reviews that actually align with human reviews? Second, LLM review stability. Are LLM reviews consistent across different models, prompts, and repeated runs? And third, LLM review gaming. Can authors iteratively edit their papers based on LLM feedback to artificially inflate scores? To answer these, the team evaluated 5 models: QN3, 6-35B, Gemma 327B, Llama 3370B, GPT-5.4 Mini, and GPT-5.4. They used both open-weight and closed-weight variants. Crucially, their dataset includes rejected papers, which is a major improvement over many prior studies that suffer from positivity bias by only using accepted submissions. In this dataset, rejected papers make up about a third of the sample, allowing for a much more robust analysis of how models differentiate quality. Let's start with validity. The researchers measured alignment using mean absolute error against human scores, Pearson correlation for best match ranking, and a semantic overlap metric using an LLM judge to see how well LLMs captured human-stated strengths and weaknesses. The results are mixed. When looking at the combined split of accepted and rejected papers, LLMs struggled to match human judgments in terms of absolute error. The best models, GPT-5.4 Mini and GPT-5.4, achieved an MAE of around 0.7. By comparison, the human-to-human MAE was 0.17. Even a naive baseline that constantly predicts the midpoint of the rating scale slightly outperformed the best LLMs in MAE. However, correlation tells a different story. In the best-case scenario, GPT-5.4 reached a best-match Pearson correlation of 0.276. Now, you might think that sounds low, but consider that the human-to-human correlation in this dataset was only 0.312. This confirms prior literature showing that human reviewers have surprisingly low agreement. The LLMs are performing competitively with humans in terms of ranking, at least in select scenarios. But there's a massive split in performance based on paper status. For accepted papers, human agreement is higher, and LLMs perform better, likely because accepted papers meet a high-quality bar, making them harder to differentiate. For rejected papers, alignment drops significantly. This suggests LLMs are better at identifying poor papers than they are at distinguishing among strong ones. Content-wise, the LLM judge analysis revealed that models are generally better at recalling strengths than weaknesses. Gemma 3 achieved the highest strength recall, while GPT-5.4 Mini was strongest at capturing weaknesses. Overall, the conclusion on validity is nuanced. LLMs can be reasonable reviewers in specific, best-case configurations, but they are not universally reliable, and their performance degrades when the acceptance decision is unknown a priori. This leads us to stability. This is where the review arcade metaphor gets very real. The study tested 5 different prompts ranging from a simple one-liner to highly detailed personas like a senior ACL reviewer. The variance across prompts is substantial. For example, GPT-5.4 Mini performed best with one prompt, but worst when averaged across all prompts. There is no clear trend that sophisticated prompting yields better results. In fact, the overly simple prompt often achieved remarkably good performance, suggesting that model sensitivity to prompt variations can cause them to alternate between being overly permissive and overly restrictive. Even more concerning is stability across repeated runs. With temperature set to 1, the models showed low standard deviation within the same run, but when you look across prompts, the deviation is much larger. More importantly, when running the same model, prompt, and submission 3 times, 36.9% of papers received at least one different score across the runs. For 20% of papers, the score delta exceeded 0.5 points. This indicates that LLM reviews are generally too unstable to be reliable as a standalone metric. If the same paper gets a 3.5 on one run and a 4.5 on the next, the system lacks the robustness required for fair peer review. Now, the part that likely matters most to the community, gameability. The researchers simulated an iterative submission improvement workflow. They took a submission, generated an LLM review, and then used an editing LLM to revise the paper based on that review. They repeated this loop for 10 iterations. They tested 3 distinct editing settings. First, a constrained setting where the LLM was only allowed to make superficial, cosmetic edits, like clarifications or copy editing, but no substantive changes. Second, a default setting inspired by prior work, which allowed some flexibility but aimed to avoid major content shifts. And third, an adversarial setting where the LLM was explicitly encouraged to game the reviewer, including fabricating evidence, hallucinating results, and adding fake citations. The results here are surprising. The constrained setting was the most effective. After 10 iterations, roughly 36% of papers saw a statistically significant increase in their LLM review scores. The effect size was small to medium, but the trend was clear. Simply clarifying weaknesses and refactoring the paper to address reviewer concerns was enough to boost scores. The default setting showed similar numbers but lacked statistical significance, likely due to higher variance in the edits. However, the adversarial setting underperformed expectations. We might assume that fabricating results or adding fake baselines would skyrocket scores, but that didn't happen. The effect sizes were weaker than in the constrained setup. The taxonomy of edits revealed why. In the adversarial setting, the LLM almost exclusively defaulted to methodological augmentation edits rather than outright fabrication. The models appear to have guardrails that resist generating obvious hallucinations, or perhaps the fabricated content introduced inconsistencies that the reviewer LLM penalized in subsequent iterations. So can LLM reviews be gamed? Yes, and they can be gamed effectively with relatively superficial changes. This brings us to Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. If authors are optimizing their papers specifically for LLM reviewers, they might be improving the text in ways that satisfy the model, but do not actually improve the scientific contribution. The study notes that while clarifications and copy editing might not represent substantive improvements, the fact that scores rise suggests the review metric is being decoupled from true paper quality. There are a few important limitations to note. The dataset has fewer reviews for rejected papers, which can skew human-human correlation metrics. Also, the study focused on automated reviews. We don't know if these iterative edits would fool human reviewers, though the nature of the edits suggests humans might be more resilient to superficial gaming. Finally, there's always the risk of data leakage, where models have seen parts of the training data, though the researchers argue this doesn't invalidate the core findings on stability and gameability. The implications for the future of AI research are significant. As LLM-assisted writing and reviewing become ubiquitous, we risk a feedback loop where papers are optimized for LLM preferences rather than scientific merit. The study urges the community to exercise extreme caution. While LLM assistance can reduce the reviewing burden, official implementation needs to be carefully designed to mitigate gameability and ensure diverse perspectives. Future evaluations need to move beyond simple scores as a surrogate for holistic assessment. Scores can be right for the wrong reasons, and reviews with diverging scores may still share the same underlying opinion. We need metrics that capture the nuance of review content and robust defenses against iterative optimization attacks. The code and prompts for this study are public, inviting the community to build on this work. The review arcade is open, but as this paper demonstrates, the house rules are still being written, and the players are learning how to beat the system. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in the latest AI research and want to help us cover more papers, check out the link in the description to support the channel. Let us know in the comments, do you think LLM reviews should be used in peer review, or is the risk of gameability too high? See you in the next one.